What's the craziest coincidence that ever happened to you? If it hadn't been for the train delay, we never would have met. I was 26, living in Tokyo, teaching English and trying to carve out a life for myself in a city that never slowed down. That day was just like any other. Work, crowded trains, the usual exhaustion. I was running late, missed my regular commuter train, and ended up squeezed into a later one. The carriage was packed shoulder to shoulder. I grabbed the nearest handrail, resigned to another uncomfortable ride. But as I shifted to make room, I locked eyes with a woman standing across from me and froze. She looked exactly like my ex-girlfriend from college back in the States. Same sharp cheekbones, same piercing green eyes. For a moment, I thought my brain was playing tricks on me. And then she smiled. "Tom," she said, hesitant in English. It was her. Emily. Thousands of miles from where we'd last seen each other 3 years earlier. We both laughed, half in shock, half in disbelief. She was in Tokyo for a 2-week business trip. I was living there. We decided to grab coffee right after that ride, a spontaneous detour from both our plans. We sat in a tiny cafe, catching up, talking like no time had passed at all. She told me about her new job, her travels. I told her about how Tokyo had changed me, made me slower to judge, quicker to adapt. By the end of that coffee, we both knew. This wasn't just a random reunion. It was a reset. We spent the next 2 weeks together, wandering shrines, getting lost in side streets, talking about everything we never said when we were younger. By the time her trip ended, we'd decided to give it another shot. This time without fear, without ego. That missed train? Best delay of my life. 3 years later, we got married. Some people say life is random. After that day, I'm not so sure. Some meetings seem random until you realize they weren't. I was studying abroad in Buenos Aires, overwhelmed by the noise, the traffic, the language that never quite stuck in my brain. I felt alone, disconnected, like a tourist in my own life. One night, feeling particularly lost, I went for a walk. The streets were slick from a sudden summer rain. Neon lights reflected in puddles. As I crossed a quiet street, I heard a whimper. A scrappy, soaked dog sat under a flickering lamppost, shivering. He looked at me with the saddest brown eyes I'd ever seen. I knelt down, held out my hand. He hesitated, then limped over. I wasn't supposed to have pets in my student housing, but I couldn't leave him there. I named him Tango. Over the next few weeks, Tango became my shadow. He followed me everywhere, to classes, to cafes, even on the crowded subways. Slowly, through him, I met people, other students, dog lovers, random strangers who would stop to pet him. Conversations started, friendships formed, my Spanish improved. By the end of the semester, Buenos Aires felt like home. When it was time to leave, I arranged for Tango to come with me. The paperwork was a nightmare, but we made it. Years later, I still have him. Old, graying, still wagging that stubborn tail. Finding a stray dog in a city of millions might seem random. But sometimes, the universe gives you exactly what you need, even if it comes on 4 legs and covered in mud. Sometimes life feels scripted, like someone is orchestrating every move without your consent. It was a sweltering July afternoon in Rome. I was dragging my suitcase through cobblestone streets, sweat plastering my shirt to my back, cursing every decision that had led me to book a cheap, no-frills hotel near the Spanish Steps. When I finally arrived, exhausted and dehydrated, the front desk clerk looked up and frowned. "Signore, I'm sorry, but your room, it's not ready yet." I must have looked ready to burst into flames because she quickly added, "But we have a better room available. Same price. Top floor, corner view. Would you like it?" I barely nodded before she slid the key across the counter. The room was nicer than I expected. 2 windows overlooking a bustling piazza, a little balcony, worn but clean sheets. I tossed my bag on the bed and collapsed, ready to sleep for days. A few hours later, jet lag woke me. I decided to grab a late dinner. As I locked the door and turned down the hallway, a woman stepped out of the room next to mine. We both froze. It was my cousin, Sarah, someone I hadn't seen in nearly a decade. We stared at each other for a second too long, then burst out laughing, disbelief on our faces. Sarah lived in Australia. I lived in the States. Neither of us knew the other was traveling. She had booked her hotel last minute because of a canceled Airbnb. I had been switched to my room because of a cleaning delay. If the hotel hadn't messed up, if she hadn't changed plans, we would have missed each other entirely. Instead, we spent 3 days exploring Rome together, cousins reconnecting in a city neither of us knew but both quickly loved. It still baffles me. The odds? Astronomical, but maybe some coincidences aren't random at all. Bad moods have a way of leading you exactly where you need to be. It was one of those days. Missed my bus, spilled coffee on my shirt, got chewed out by my boss. When lunch rolled around, I just wanted to get out of the office and breathe. I stormed out, walking aimlessly, and ducked into the first coffee shop I saw. Only when I got my latte did I realize it wasn't my usual place. Wrong logo, wrong baristas. Even the chairs were different. I sat down anyway, grumbling to myself. That's when someone at the next table said, "Rough day?" I looked up. A woman about my age, easy smile, kind eyes. I nodded, not really in the mood to talk. But she kept chatting. Small talk. Nothing deep, but warm in a way that cut through the fog of my mood. Turns out she was a graphic designer looking for a copywriter for a freelance project. I was a copywriter, sick of my soul-crushing day job. We exchanged info. The project turned into a steady stream of freelance gigs. Within 6 months, I had enough work to quit my job and go full-time freelance, all because I turned into the wrong coffee shop on a day when nothing else seemed to go right. Some wrong turns are the best turns you can take. It started with a text message. Just one wrong number. I was in Seattle, holed up in my apartment during a grim, gray winter, feeling isolated. I hadn't talked to anyone in days. Then one night, my phone buzzed. "Hey, you still on for tomorrow? Meet at 7?" I didn't recognize the number. I almost ignored it, but boredom, or maybe loneliness, got the better of me. I typed back, "Wrong number. Sorry." A second later, "No worries. How's your night?" We started chatting. I found out his name was Sam. He thought he was texting a buddy from work. I told him I was just a stranger caught in his misfire. We joked about bad weather, weird takeout, Netflix recommendations. The conversation stretched for hours. It wasn't flirty, just easy, comfortable, two people laughing into the void. Over the next few weeks, we kept texting. Random stuff, memes, life updates, books we liked. Neither of us pressed for more. It was an accidental friendship, growing in the gaps of our routines. Eventually, we decided to meet for coffee. If only to confirm we weren't catfishing each other. He turned out to be exactly who he said he was. Tall, bookish, quick to smile. We're still friends. Good friends. The kind you can call at 3 a.m. when the world feels heavy. All because one night someone dialed the wrong number, and I answered. Some coincidences feel like they're pulled straight from a novel. I was in Marseille for a photography assignment, wandering the old port, shooting shots of sun-bleached boats and crumbling stone alleyways. The heat was relentless, the kind that made the air shimmer and the pavement sticky underfoot. To cool off, I ducked into a dusty antique shop tucked away from the tourist crowds. It smelled of old wood, leather, and the kind of mustiness that promises hidden treasures. I was flipping through a box of old postcards when I saw it, a faded card with a picture of the exact harbor I'd been shooting that morning. Curious, I turned it over. There, in looping cursive handwriting, was a name I recognized immediately, my grandfather's. He had lived his whole life in the States, or so I thought. The postcard was addressed to a woman I didn't know, dated 1952, with a message in French that roughly translated to, "Missing you more every day. Wish you were here." Heart pounding, I bought the postcard for €2 and spent the rest of the day in a haze, trying to make sense of it. When I got home and showed it to my mother, her face went pale. It turned out my grandfather had lived a whole other life before settling down, a life no one in the family talked about, a woman he loved, a life he left behind. That postcard, lost for decades, found me, in the same city where he had once stood, looking at the same harbor. Coincidence? Maybe. But it felt like a message across time. Losing your wallet while traveling abroad is one of those nightmare scenarios that plays on loop in your brain, right up there with getting lost or arrested. It happened to me in Chiang Mai, a city of temples, street food, and, as I discovered, unexpected kindness. I was at a bustling night market, wallet tucked into my back pocket like an amateur tourist. Somewhere between buying mango sticky rice and bargaining for a handmade bag, it disappeared. Gone. Cash, cards, ID. I retraced my steps in a panic, heart hammering. Nothing. I spent the night canceling cards, calling banks, filing a report at a police station where no one spoke English. The next day I was sitting on the curb outside my hostel, head in my hands, when a man approached. Local, middle-aged, kind face. He held out a worn leather wallet. My wallet. I blinked, confused. He smiled and pointed to the street. He mimed finding it on the ground, holding it up, gesturing at me like, "Is this yours?" Everything was still inside, even the cash. Through broken English and hand gestures, I learned he had spotted it the night before, but didn't know how to find me. So he had waited outside the market the next day, hoping I'd come by again. I tried to give him money. He refused, just waved it off with a laugh and walked away. Sometimes the world feels cold and indifferent, but sometimes, on rare, unbelievable days, a stranger finds your lost wallet and refuses a reward. I left Thailand a week later, wallet intact, and faith in humanity restored. You hear about doppelgangers, someone out there who looks just like you, but you never expect to meet yours. I was living in Berlin, freelancing, scraping by. One night, a friend dragged me to a dingy bar in Kreuzberg. Low ceilings, flickering neon, a live band too loud for the tiny space. We were halfway through cheap beers when someone tapped my shoulder. I turned and froze. It was like looking into a mirror. Same face, same nose, same messy dark hair. Even our outfits were eerily similar. Jeans, hoodie, old leather jacket. We just stared at each other. It was surreal, like my brain couldn't process it. The guy, his name was Jonas, burst out laughing first. We compared birthdays, 3 days apart, hometowns, different countries, and ancestry, both with German grandmothers. No relation, at least none we could find. People at the bar were losing it, taking photos, cracking jokes about glitches in the Matrix. Jonas and I ended up spending the night talking about music, travel, weird jobs we'd had. He was visiting from Denmark in Berlin for just a weekend. The kicker? We both worked freelance graphic design. Both had the same cheap IKEA lamp in our apartments. Both had, at some point, broken our left ankle skateboarding. Weird doesn't even begin to cover it. When he left, we exchanged emails, joked about switching lives for a week, Parent Trap style. We still keep in touch, sending the occasional update like long-lost twins separated by fate. Coincidence? Glitch? Fate? I don't know. But if there are infinite versions of you out there, I was lucky enough to meet mine. Missing a flight usually ruins your day. In my case, it changed my life. I was supposed to be on the 10:30 a.m. flight from Sydney to Melbourne, a quick hop, nothing special. But thanks to a late taxi and an endless security line, I missed boarding by less than 5 minutes. Frustrated, I got rebooked onto the next flight, 2 hours later. I grabbed a miserable airport coffee and found a seat near the gate. That's when I saw her, sitting across from me, nose buried in a book I loved but hadn't thought about in years. We made eye contact. I smiled, half out of boredom, half out of habit. She smiled back. It wasn't love at first sight. It wasn't even interest at first sight. Just two strangers with time to kill. We ended up talking about books, about travel, about the weird quirks of airport life. We sat next to each other on the flight, kept talking all the way to Melbourne, exchanged numbers when we landed. One conversation turned into coffee. Coffee turned into dinner. Dinner turned into weekends. 2 years later, we got married. If I'd made that flight, if the taxi had been faster or the security line shorter, we never would have met. Sometimes missing what you think you need is exactly what you need. Books were always our thing. Back in high school, Jamie and I spent hours in the local bookstore, a dusty, creaky place with armchairs that sagged in the middle and the faint smell of old paper. We dreamed about writing novels, living in New York, seeing our names on covers. But life, as it tends to, got in the way. After graduation, we drifted apart, different colleges, different cities. Years later, after a messy breakup and an even messier job loss, I found myself in Boston, lonely, tired, and not really sure what I was doing with my life. One rainy afternoon, I ducked into a small independent bookstore, the kind that feels like a secret, half hidden between a bakery and a dry cleaner. I wandered aimlessly through the aisles until a book caught my eye. Jamie Field's Where the Light Falls. I froze. Jamie Fields. Same name, same dream. I picked up the book, flipped to the author bio. No photo, but the blurb mentioned growing up in our tiny hometown. Heart-pounding, I bought the book on the spot. The clerk, a young woman with purple hair and a nose ring, noticed my expression. "You're a fan?" she asked. "I think I used to know her," I said, still dazed. She grinned. "You're in luck. She's doing a signing here this afternoon." I almost left. Part of me was terrified. Would she even remember me? But a few hours later, I found myself back in the bookstore, clutching my copy, heart hammering. And there she was, a little older, a little sharper, but unmistakably Jamie. Her eyes lit up when she saw me. We hugged like no time had passed. We spent the next hour catching up, laughing, remembering, mourning the years we lost. She signed my book with a message only I would understand. For the one who started it all. Sometimes you lose people. And sometimes the universe conspires to bring them back.